All right, so I want to thank Quant once again for his collaborative efforts in regards to the research. But basically, this is not like the deepest of deepest dives, but it's all going to make sense here shortly. So number one, look at this from DTCC. You can go to dtcc.com if you are the type of person you want to verify the sources. Finality announced a series of B capital raise with DTCC among the participating investors. Posted not that long ago, okay? Posted basically less than a week ago. So, we're going to show you a little bit of like current news, go back, time, tie the whole thing together. So, recently, Finality, like I said, wholesale digital cash payment system will support tokenized peer-to-peer payments or markets. We covered this in another deep dive. You want to catch up on that. But basically speaking, they cover a number of like additional organized made financial investments. The firm is part of what they call a series of B financial funding rounds. Okay. The investment in Finality builds upon DTCC signing a definitive agreement in October as of last month to acquire Securrency Inc. Now, I want you to pay attention to Securrency Inc. That's going to be one of the main highlights of this particular, if you want to call it deep dive, whatever you want to call it, in regards to State Street and so on. So try to remember that. A leading developer of institutional grade digital asset infrastructure. And by the way, when we get to the very end of this coverage, we're even going to tie in some Stellar on how they both share Stellar and Quant, this institutional grade digital asset infrastructure company with Securrency. Okay. And of course, the whole, State Street connection there as well. The acquisition, at least back in October, will position DTCC to help bridge best-in-class industry practices with advanced digital technology to encourage acceptance and adoption of digital assets. And again, at the very end of the outline, you're going to understand why Stellar and these guys simply make sense. Because think about it, Stellar is one of those great bridge assets for both on and off ramps, right? So right there in itself, you can kind of see how that's mentioned. Now look at this quote for a second. As the worlds of TradeFi and DeFi converge, DTCC is committed to partnering with industry participants, regulators, and other stockholders to help introduce the standards and governance needed to accelerate ecosystem growth while ensuring the highest levels of market safety and stability. Now, we know that obviously one of those standards is going to be the ISO TC 307 standard. And for people who still don't get that, it's okay. You got to keep in mind that this Quant network standard blankets so many things. When we did the whole thing of Quant and JASMY, we gave you that outline of, look here, it's not just interoperability. That's like the tip of the iceberg. It's AI. It's, IoT. It's literally at every single turn of the table, even metaverse, right? The ISO TC 307 standard. And by the way, saying, hey, look, especially the whole thing with Japan, we have working groups for a reason. So there's that. Let's get more into this. Finality builds upon their agreement to acquire Securrency and will help foster new digital payment rails that will be essential to establishing a robust digital infrastructure, enabling, of course, interoperability and driving adoption of digital assets. Your key takeaway tonight on tonight's coverage in regards to Quant State Street is, do we finally have an example of where we can have retail adoption? Now, some people will say no. It'd be like, Max, hell no. You know that. This is one of the problems that we have. Quant, just like Ripple, their focus is not on retail. But maybe you can have other examples of the bigger players, such as Securrency, if I pronounced that right again. Excuse me. Yes, Securrency, to bring in that adoption without even Quant having to do anything in that regard because it's not its focus. So I want to take you over to here, and I don't understand why this, maybe Quant was taking a screenshot and it was dark. I don't know. It's a little bit dark on here. I apologize, but it's okay. I mean, Quant is not perfect, and I'm not perfect either. But basically speaking, check this out for a second. You will see where it's highlighted here, and it states the investment in Finality, okay? Because we are talking still about Finality. We've done quite a few deep dives about Finality, but the investment in Finality builds upon DTC DTCC, excuse me, signing a definitive agreement in October to acquire Securrency, like I pointed out earlier. And it also goes on to mention, our investment in Finale builds upon agreement to acquire Securrency and will help foster. Again, that was the previous one, so I apologize. I already read that part. I'll chop that out later. All right. Here's another press release. This is October 19th now, roughly, I don't know, about a month, right, from the previous coverage. This is, something we want to pay attention to. They, of course, DTCC signed definitive agreement to acquire blockchain-based financial technology firm Securrency to drive development of the digital post-trade infrastructure for global financial markets. Basically speaking, in a nutshell, also to achieve more of this adoption that we all want. You see New York, London, Hong Kong, Singapore, all this stuff cited here on October 19th. DTCC, the premier market infrastructure for the global financial services industry, announced then, at least in October, they have signed a definitive agreement to acquire Securrency. Now, again, you may be wondering, I don't see the whole connection to State Street. I promise we'll get into that here really shortly, not to the end. Securrency, if you weren't aware of it, is the leading developer of institutional-grade digital asset infrastructure. The acquisition, which is expected to close within the last several weeks, which just means it's done, will position DTCC to provide global leadership in bridging best-in-class industry practices with advanced digital tech to encourage acceptance and adoption, of course, of these particular digital assets. Again, we want to see more of that. We want to see more of that all the time. Even in the JASMY coverage, that's not tonight, but the recorded video that'll be put out, it's all about who can help, for instance, JASMY get more to that worldwide adoption. Because we could talk about this until we're blue in the face. If we can have the greatest utility in the world, if we don't have more adoption, what do we really have? We have like a nothing burger, right? So Securrency will become a fully owned subsidiary of DTCC, and this is worth pointing out. It will operate under the name DTC Digital Assets, so get used to it. Nadine Shakar, who I want to point out here, CEO of Securrency, will join DTCC as a managing director. Now, I'll just give you the quick gist here soon. She was part of State Street. All right. And you want to pay attention to that. So it states here that DTC Managing Director, Chief Information Officer, Shakur, I don't know how to pronounce it, will also join the DTC Management Committee. In addition, Dan Doney, CTO, founder of Securrency, and all these other big people. They have roughly 100 Securrency staff, full-time employees, and contractors. Frank LaSala, who is the president and CEO of DTCC, said, quote, Securrency is an important strategic acquisition that will give us the tech to drive market-wide transformation by enabling end-to-end digital lifecycle processing for tokenized assets. Boom. Pay attention to that. Why is that so significant? Because we can talk all day long about, hey, Quant's got this with the Bank of International Settlements. Quant's got this with the Bank of England. Right. They got all this stuff going on. Awesome. Working in the background. But how can we have more of, let's say, like, for instance, what's going on even with the retail, right? I think that's worth pointing out because now you're starting to finally see this. And this is a good thing, especially being a retail holder. Not that I would ever dismiss it and be like, you know what, I'm going to pay only attention to what's going on with the institutional side of things, because I mean, obviously that's going to give us the most amount of growth. But can we combine the two? Can we get some news about even something like this? I think the answer is yes. How so? Look what it says. Bringing together DTC's commitment to provide market stability and our unparalleled network of financial market participants with the sophistication of the Securrency technology, will be able to be in a leading position to unlock the digital assets and help guide the industry through its digital transformation journey. We're already going through the start of this transformational journey. I mean, the new monetary authorities, this new shift, right? We believe this will be the next generation of financial market infrastructure. It will further reduce settlement times. Think about that for a second. Facilitate market transparency and even risk management, right? Like we've always stated, the big institutions don't want to come into this. There's going to be a lot of risk, right? And we always said before, Can you give examples of we got to have that institutional framework, then we get the clarity. Here is something that has embraced the framework because they are the framework. Do you follow what I'm saying? By combining DTCC's digital capabilities and Securency's tech, DTCC will fast track, and I love this statement, development of its enterprise digital asset platform to unlock the power of institutional DeFi. And how long have we been talking about institutional swaps? At every single turn of the table that we can get into. How about this, for instance? Last week, we covered the whole thing with Bank Social. Technically speaking, you could call that institutional swaps. And have you looked at that chart? Shout out to Mike Cornwell. He has been looking at it. Have you been noticing that it's like as soon as institutional money comes in, right? Then, for instance, they inject tokens. Of course, there's a drop, and that's why it's been going back and forth a lot. But that thing is up like 200 or 300%. I'll have to double check and wait for coverage in regards to an update for Bank Social. So there's a lot to be mentioned here. I'm not going to get into all of it. I do like this quote from this lady that we're putting focus on, Shakar. We join forces with DTCC because we are excited to bring together DTCC's infrastructure capabilities with Securency's tech to enable or embrace, I should say, a future where the digitalization of capital markets is at the forefront of innovation. I'm telling you guys flat out, I know I don't talk enough about Clearpool anymore, but I've always recognized Clearpool from this particular statement right here, and that is, if you're going to have somebody who is going to embrace, like it says, a future where digitalization of capital markets is at the forefront of innovation, what is Clearpool? Clearpool is a capital markets ecosystem, all right? The tokenization of DeFi lending through a capital markets ecosystem. So that this right here will even enable that. How cool is that? And, you know, the whole reason why I got a Clearpool before, because I was one of the few people to pay attention to at the time, went from 40 cents to $2 and roughly $2.50, something like that, in 2.5 weeks. What about the height of the next particular bull market? And what about the whole idea of seeing statements like this because of the enablers that help get it done through everything we've been preaching about for like almost 2 years now, in regards to you have to have the infrastructure because that creates the framework. Once you get that, then you simply get the next part, which is the clarity. The institutions coming in, and it can't be volatile. All right, I'm gonna get into this last part right here. DTC's digital asset strategy focuses on establishing digital infrastructure, like I mentioned, to extend its core services to the digital asset ecosystem and deliver no-touch end-to-end processing. There's a lot of things that it includes here, right? Exploring development of digital products, services, address gaps in the market, infrastructure to optimize end-to-end life cycles. Stellar always talks about that too, do they not? Establishing control framework for digital securities. Interesting. Back to the whole thing of what Larry Fink was talking about. How about this? Executing client-driven pilots aligned to the firm's core capabilities and services. Advancing industry-wide dialogue on interoperability to inform future connectivity models. Everything you see here outlines Quant, but how can we get more into the whole thing specifically of Quant? I promise that we'll get into that here in a bit. I do want to highlight just a couple more things. Look at this. Industry-owned and governed. The firm innovates purposely, simplifying the complexities of clearing, settlement, asset servicing, transaction processing, trade reporting, and data services across asset classes, and bringing increased security, enhanced resilience, soundness to financial markets. I mean, if you think about it, this is everything that we've been talking about where we want to see our Ripple XRP do this, Stellar, you name it. But can you have a platform that will enable all of these that we're into, right? For the reason of its infrastructure. I think that's where we're going with this. In 2022, listen to this for a second, DTCC's subsidiaries processed security transactions, listen to this, valued at 2.5 quadrillion. For some of you guys saying, there's no way we're going to get to some of these crazy market caps in the future. There's just no way possible. Max is full of crap because he doesn't know tokenomics or something like that. Hey, call it whatever you want. I just look at what we see, and I do more of the deeper dive to just bring you guys the info. If you want to agree with me to disagree, it's okay. I might get butthurt about it. But look what it also states. You have a depository subsidiary provided custody in asset servicing for securities issues from over 150 countries and territories, valued at 72 trillion US dollars. DTCC's global trade repository service, through locally registered, licensed, and approved trade repositories, processes more than 17.5 billion messages annually. And what do we know came out today as far as, ISO 222? Today is the 20th. So you would imagine that even though today seems like it's an ISO 222 nothing burger, right? You also have to keep in mind there's also Quant with ISO TC 307, and everything outlined here talks about what? Standards. So I'm not saying that like, oh, hey, I'm only for ISO TC 307 and those particular standards, but I also recognize that the two go hand in hand. And when it comes to infrastructure, every single time we look more into it, ISO TC 307. Why? Because that's a Quant network standard. And that is what some of these back end institutional frameworks are going with. All right, let's jump to this next part. So here it is. Securrency will become fully owned subsidiary of DTCC. Will operate under the name of DTC Digital Assets, right? And who's in charge of this? Nadine Shakur, CEO of Securrency, right? Jumping into it, look what Gilbert Verdian mentions here if you're wondering the Quant connection. Gilbert Verdian talks about this a while back. Congratulations, Nadine. Great achievement for wider adoption of digital assets. Yeah, giving credit where credit's due from the head honcho, Mr. GV. Now, I'm going to jump over to here. This is only about 8.5 minutes, but this is in regards to something big. This happened in a particular interview last June. I'll give you guys a little heads up about this. It was a lineup, right, at the Wealth Forum in Sea Island, Georgia. Had some speakers. They delivered compelling sessions on wealth management. They had all sorts of topics, but the key thing was recognizing Chief Security or Strategy Officer of Securrency discussing some of the greatest hurdles to adopt digital assets and how the internet is impacting how people will understand the utility of blockchain. Like we're all trying to still understand that. And why he thinks wealth managers will be very early adopters of digital assets at scale, because you're always talking about scale, you guys, in the next few years. He's also going to explain how Securrency, since we're on the topic of Securrency, have created tech to allow banks, listen to this, to transition into the digital world, and how he thinks individuals can prepare themselves for the inevitable, yeah, that's right, because it's coming soon, move to a more digital banking system. Everything that we've been talking about for the longest time, but like getting more into this and the bigger picture. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. I know it's a lot to get into, but I want to get this going, and then we'll jump back into the comments and have a pause and all that here in a bit. Here we go.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be here.
So Patrick, why don't we start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Securrency. Securrency is a blockchain-based digital assets infrastructure company, really focused on bringing blockchain technology to the traditional world of securities and really traditional assets, leveraging the power of blockchain and focused on really a compliance framework to streamline the movement of value.
Now, we're talking a lot at the moment about wealth management, and in particular, digital assets and how they're going to feature in portfolios going forward. What do you feel are like the greatest hurdles for people in terms of adopting digital assets?
Yeah, well, so I think that, when we talk about digital assets, and again, focusing on a digital wrapper around assets that wealth managers and investors are used to seeing today, but a digital wrapper that streamlines things. And so, my prediction is, of course, that everything is going to be moved to this wrapper within the next decade. But great question on hurdles and obstacles. I think number one, there's a discourse in the marketplace that sort of falls on two sides. You're either completely anarchistic and in favor of decentralization, or you say, oh well, this DeFi stuff is never going to work, and it's all going to be traditional finance, and this is just kind of a gimmick. The answer, as usually happens, lies in the middle. So I think balance is one. And I think the second thing is really abstracting away the complexity, and that means one, talking about the assets and the outcomes as opposed to talking about the kind of more sort of detailed nuances of the technology itself, which removes a lot of the fear and a lot of the uncertainty. I like to say, some folks never thought that grandma would give up her checkbook, and yet here she is with online banking. And that's because it was simple on the front end, right? And so that's the second part of it, is abstracting away the complexity of using these assets. So it's those two things, I think, that will spur adoption.
Do you think there's too much, or there needs to be a separation between people who are speculating to try and make money and people who actually understand the utility of blockchain technology? Because in some ways, I feel like, to use Bitcoin as the pioneering asset, but it seems to me that Bitcoin was almost too much, was a victim of its own success to a degree. It became too much, it just sort of went up too quickly, it drew too much people in, and now it's sort of come back down, a bit like the dot-com boom. And a bit like the dot-com boom, do you see those analogies there with the internet and with the dot-com boom and how cryptocurrency is playing out?
Yeah, 100%. So it is a great analogy. And of course, partly this goes back to the previous point, which is people use the internet now without knowing how it works. It's just not relevant. They're now familiar with the outcomes and the possibilities. So I think the same is true here. But on the point of complexity and focusing on what you refer to as a more speculative aspect of it. So yes, it's absolutely true. People get really focused on the price of Dogecoin or something like that, and not really looking at the tremendous utility of the underlying technology. And so what we do is, when we focus on really thorny questions that have plagued the financial services industry, clearing and settlement, counterparty risk that's associated with that. When we talk about the cross-jurisdictional movement of value, having to deal with different regulations, right? So if you think about, why does it take so long to move value across borders? And it's usually a compliance issue, and they're usually a siloed system talking to another siloed system because of compliance. And if you can automate that compliance and streamline the movement, that's the real value. But I do think that there is a value that crypto has played in showing these possibilities. The fact that, when Bitcoin came out, people said, hang on a second, I can move value from one side of the world to the other at the push of a button. And certainly that has its downsides in the form of money laundering and other kind of illicit behavior. But that demonstration was powerful, and it spurred a lot of innovation in the traditional finance space. And it's that innovation that I think we really ought to be focused on.
So are you talking a lot with banks to try and help them to work out how to make their payment systems and all the things you've been talking about in terms of security, help them move more into the digital world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fact, that's a core focus for us. So we work with a lot of the largest institutions. What we're really, again, focused on is that kind of that deep infrastructure. And we recognize sort of early on that as these institutions look to make this transition, they're afraid of the complexity and also the disruption of the kind of the rip and replace. So we really sought to create technology that could interface it with existing infrastructure and allow for an orderly sort of transition. And I think that's really important. I think the industry needs to really kind of embrace that concept that it's not either or, and you don't have to create a new world in which your digital assets live here and your traditional assets live here. We can bring that together seamlessly and allow for this transition, because everything will move on these rails, as I said, in the next decade.
So what do you tell individuals who need to prepare themselves for a more digital banking system? What's the best way that they can prepare? Number
one, to not overthink it. You will be able to, access a greater inventory, a larger inventory, and have better distribution options if you're an issuer. But it won't look terribly different, and you shouldn't worry about what's happening in the background. I mean, you should from a security perspective if you're an issuer, if you're a financial services provider, and you should, of course, from a compliance perspective. But for wealth managers and their clients, I think that the experience will be really kind of a seamless one. That they're not going to be focused on the digital wrapper. They're going to be focused on the assets and the opportunities.
And looking out into 2023, what is one prediction you have in the world of wealth management and how we manage our own money?
So 2023 might be a little bit early, but I would say within the next 3 to 5 years, the wealth managers will be very early adopters at scale of these digital assets, particularly in the private markets, because the potential for improved, enhanced distribution, liquidity, better pricing mechanisms, all of that is what comes on the back of these new digital rails. And I think wealth managers are going to be, again, among the first movers there, seeing the opportunities that they can create for their clients. And in fact, we're already beginning to see kind of the first wave of this. And so that would be my prediction for the next couple of years.
And I do just want to ask, what do you classify as a digital asset? Because obviously we're not just talking cryptocurrencies, we're talking NFTs, we're talking digital stocks and bonds. Like, what else can we put in that bracket?
That's really such an excellent question, and actually one that is near and dear to my heart. I think that we need a better lexicon, a better taxonomy for these assets. What I mean is things that we see today, traditional funds and equities, debt instruments, but in this new blockchain-based digital wrapper. Some of these will be natively digital, meaning that the asset itself is represented on the blockchain. Some will be sort of a hypothecated, meaning that you have a blockchain representation of an asset that sort of lives somewhere else. In the long run, everything will be natively digital. But when I talk about it, I'm really talking about a digital wrapper around traditional assets using these new rails.
Well, Patrick, it's been so fascinating chatting to you. These are exciting times, and thank you very much.
Thanks. It's my pleasure, Tim.
All right. So one thing I wanted to point out earlier in that interview was that gentleman sitting on the right when he was talking about, some of these silos talking to each other. So, I mean, sometimes, guys can talk about interoperability all day, and, a lot of other blockchains talk about, interoperability and so on. But when you got more into that interview with things with what he mentioned and so on, it's like, man, that spells quant all the way, And of course, we're going to get more into this. We're going to take a brief pause to recognize some comments, super chat, and so on. After we do that, we'll get back into this and so on, because it is one of the main highlights tonight, along with talking about ISO 222. And then we also have some, I know this sounds nuts, big news in regards to ADA, right? I would only cover ADA if I felt as though there was some significant news. There is, if you're in ADA, you want to stick around for that. Yes, I have ADA. Do I talk about it much? Not really, but tonight is definitely worth talking about. And it's something that's going to happen in regards to the end of the month, which is kind of cool. All right. Let's read this from Boomer. He says, if JASMY locked up 10 billion with the current market cap, the price would be 0.00646. All right. Well, thanks for that info, Mr. Boomer. And I'll read this real quick from Corey Bibe. I believe in the JASMY white papers, Hara said they would like to lock up 35 billion by 2026 and 2027. It'll be a slow lockup. And so far, they, have stayed the course, or stayed true, I should say, to what has been mentioned in the white paper. I mean, that's great, So we'll see what happens. I think it's gonna be a slow lockup too, though. All right. Yes, let's welcome Antoine Mora. Buenas noches. Right back at you. Thank you. All right, let's see here. I'm gonna scroll further down. Richie Rich is in the house. Good to have you. Let's see here. My back is hurt, y'all. I can't move. Oh, I'm sorry, April. Sorry. I hope your back gets better. Okay. All right. But good to see Miss. Hey. All right. Maximus Crypto Crew, thank you for stopping by. Mr. Lambos. Squid is in the house. Where? Oh, wherever Squidward is, Mr. Edward Vinson. Good to have him. Let's recognize this. Henry Brown gifted one Maximus Crypto membership. I did see on the other screen it was to Corey Bibe was the lucky draw. So congratulations to the one and only Mr. Corey Bibe. Thank you again to Henry Brown. And you donated to this guy, aka JASMY, that's a scam, Corey Bibe. So that's super cool. He did thank Henry. Thank you so much for that. And yes, thank you, Henry. That was awesome. And thank you for the $5 super chat. You like the content, hit the like button, subscribe, and share the button. Yes, thank you so much for stating that. Currently, we are at, let me just refresh this, 41 likes. So we definitely could use more likes. But thank you guys. And let's see, any specific questions? We got Dennis Leal in the house. Dennis Leal, are you related to Din G? Like you're Din and he's also Din? I don't know. Maybe you're not. All right, let's read this. This is a question. Dennis Leal, with BlackRock and others who are heavily invested in stocks in the traditional, money/investment system, how fast or slow do they want to move to the new digital system? They have to figure out how to make money while leaving the old system and adopt the new digital system. Yeah, very true. You can't just go right into it. As much as we want the click of the fingers, flip the switch, and so on, there's obviously a process, and that's why we're having to wait this out. But it seems like you answered your own question. All right, but good to see you, Mr. Dennis Leal. Boom. All right, let's jump back to what we have. Basically, one thing I do want to point out, because I do have some notes. So that guy you just saw, for instance, right? He is from that interview, okay? He is chief strategy officer from Securrency. And we talked about this lady, Nadine Shakur. Well, that guy you saw is Patrick Campos, okay? Basically, in regards to him, according to the notes I have, you have to keep in mind that this guy, was talking about a digital wrapper, okay? And I'll show you guys a little bit about that in a second. Actually, I'll just show it right now. Let me just jump to this part real quick. So in the notes I have, especially from Quant Papa, this guy talks specifically in that interview about a quote-unquote digital wrapper, okay? No, not MCMC, literally a digital wrapper for enterprise-grade assets. Why is that significant? How do we tie this into Quant? Because everybody's going to be asking that. I'd be asking that. The reason why is because we're going to show you this right here. And if I could just get the darn screenshot going on. There it is. All right. It's this right here. How you like them apples, huh? How you like them apples? I mean, really, at the end of the day, boom, there you go. Straight from the Quant network site. Overledger provides a wrapper to make blockchains enterprise ready. Don't you just love how we connect the dots on this? Another great example of doing so. All right, jumping back more into this. I want to give you a little bit more of that outline because if anything, why not? I'm going to share this with you. So you know this lady that we're talking about? Who is this lady? This lady is Nadine Shakur. And why point her out? Well, before I show you the actual picture, it says straight from the Quant network. It says next up here at Sibos. This was, of course, back in October 13th of 2022. It says digital assets. Who will win the battle? Serving digital assets. Who's one of the speakers? Nadine Shakur. And at that time, State Street. Now, fast forward to Securrency, all right? And look who was also part of the list. Stephen Prosperi from Dtcc. We cited them at the beginning of the outline. All right, so again, Nadine Shakur, State Street. Interesting. What is this all about? And why does it matter so much? Well, it does matter a lot, right? And again, look what it says over here. Nadine Shakur of State Street, just in case you missed it. All right, let's blow this up. Here she is. Just in case you didn't see. All right, some people want a little bit bigger. Okay. A little bit more background about her. She is the CEO over at Securrency. Notice what's pinned here, Boston, Massachusetts. Remember a while back we were talking about all that stuff in regards to Quant and Boston? I think it was like a few months back. I don't know if some of you guys remember some of that. Here's an interview of her at this particular one. Here's this as well. Gilbert Verdian, April 15th. Just returned from where? Boston. Yes, Boston. Speaking at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Remember when that all happened, especially when it came to, Project Hamilton, Icebreaker, all that stuff. I think, or was it a little bit of Roslyn, but I would say more focused on Hamilton at the time. Remember you guys saw some of that at the end of last year, going into the early this year. But yeah, speaking at MIT conference on the future of financial infrastructure in CBDCs. Great to meet visionaries and the future of, it gets cut off there, I imagine, finance. Getting into it, look what's again cited. Blockchain-based compliance-aware tokenization with Nadine Shakur, CEO of Securrency, April 11, 2023, in startup. Look what it says. April 11, 2023, in startup, Boston. Here she is, part of this whole thing at Cybos. And I think to blow it up a little bit more, I think I have another picture. Oh, that's fine, actually. That's big enough. All right, let me take you to this. So it states a podcast mapping out the Swiss and global fintech ecosystem. Now, before we get into this, actually, let me just pause here for a moment because I do need to put some emphasis on the Quant Papa notes. For one, he has some notes here, and the crazy thing, okay, is this lady, okay? Basically speaking, in regards to her, you got to keep in mind a few key things. It's like, well, who is this lady other than she was part of State Street and so on? Well, Quant Papa found this information, of course, on the Wayback Time Machine. And, this Nadine Shakur, and of course also Dtcc, she basically has no technical background at all. And again, this is how I want to put it in layman's terms for you guys to understand. No technical background at all. Why would somebody with no technical background at all want to get involved with the likes of Quant, right? Think about it for a second. How could she make an interoperable solution with zero experience? True. How about not just her, but many others that are coming in and we're getting a whiff of, hey, what Quant is all about. She is only a veteran to the banking system, right? She works with banks, State Street, and so on. That's what she knows. She has no technical skill. For all the more that Augustine Karstens of the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, he doesn't have any of those technical skills either. But he's a big wig banker, right? So let's take you to this for a second. And basically, I want to share this, I should say, with you. And this comes from like a podcast, I guess you could say. I got to play the whole thing, but at least you'll be able to hear her voice and so on. Like roughly 5 minutes, but it's a podcast mapping out the Swiss and global fintechs ecosystem. It was back on April 11, 2023. And look what it says again. Blockchain-based, compliance-aware tokenization with Nadine Shakur. She was part of this thing called Voice of Fintech with Rudolf Falat. Blockchain-based, compliance-aware tokenization with Nadine Shakur, CEO of Securrency. Nadine Shakur, and I'll blow this up a little bit more so you can see the writing, just in case you're sitting on your couch, you're like boomer F and sooner. You know how I always say that. CEO of Securrency, U.S. FinTech, RegTech, building digital asset marketplaces, and backed by who? State Street. Because some of you guys still want that, like, hey, the title says Quant State Street. You better back this up a little bit. Yeah, I get it. She spoke to this guy. He's the founder of Voice of Fintech podcast about tokenization. in financial services with an understanding of the regulatory needs of its clients. Like I said, Nadine, American Bankers 2023 or 2021, number 3 most powerful woman in finance. So she's not a nothing burger at all. Securrency, of course, is a fintech and a regtech using blockchain to deliver white labeled institutional grade digital asset marketplaces. Again, marketplaces lead to what? More of that widespread adoption. Here are the questions that Nadine answered. I mean, I'll play, I think I'll play about 5 minutes of this just to kind of give you an idea because it's a long interview. But it says, tell us how, Nadine, tell us, how did you get to what you do these days? What problem is Securrency solving? Why is it worth solving? But this part, tokenization and financial inclusion go hand in hand. What about the suitability, however? How are illiquid assets made more liquid through tokens for everyone? Key clients. I mean, it's a really good interview. How about this one? Blockchain protocols, which ones to leverage? Were you affected by the Ethereum merge? All this stuff, right? I'm not gonna play all of it because it's kind of long, but I do want to play at least like a first 5 minutes to give you an idea of why this is so significant. We have a little bit more for you guys in regards to this deep dive, but come on, guys, not every day you get to mention Quant and State Street. So let's listen to this for a second. If you appreciate the coverage, please smash the like, make sure you're subscribed, and you hit that bell notification. Here we go.
Voice of FinTech.
Welcome to Voice of FinTech, a podcast mapping out the Swiss and global fintech scene, connecting fintech enthusiasts with startups, incubators, accelerators, business angels and VCs, and incumbents interested in partnerships. Voice of FinTech will help you navigate the fintech ecosystem. Here you can listen to the startup founder stories, what investors and incumbents are looking for when dealing with startups, and find out more about resources provided by incubators and accelerators. My name is Rudy Falad, and I'll be hosting this podcast. Hello and welcome to Voice of FinTech. Today we're going to travel to New York and we're going to talk about tokenization, because also in the US, just like in Switzerland, people are looking into any opportunities related to tokenization because it's related to getting access to investment opportunities for more people, being more efficient, all kinds of things like this. But also it's a different kind of regulatory framework and philosophy in the US. So I'm very curious to find out more about it. And we're going to talk to Nadine from Securrency, and we're going to talk about tokenization. Welcome. How are you today, Nadine?
Hello, Rudy. Thank you so much for having me.
Brilliant. So tell us, how did you get to do what you do these days? Because as I always say, maybe you couldn't really study tokenization in college or something like this. So how did you become a founder and a CEO in a tokenization company?
Let me tell you, Rudy, everything I've done in my 30-year career, you don't learn in college. So I started my career in banking, and I have a good 30 years of experience in that area. In my last job, I was the head of digital for State Street, and I got the good fortune discovering Securrency. We had invested in them. So I am the CEO, unfortunately not a founder, but we invested in them. I got to sit on their board, and I really loved the mission that they were setting out to do. The mission and vision of Dan Doney, who's the founder and the CTO of the company today, which was really looking to untap liquidity throughout the market. So I fell in love with that, caught the bug earlier on, and it was a good opportunity to move from a large institution to a startup and really try to make a dent in modernizing the infrastructure of capital markets.
I see. So let's dive into it. What is the problem that Securrency is solving? And secondly, why is it worth solving? Because I often say, unfortunately, there are many problems in this world, but it's sometimes not economically viable to sort them. So how does this work in your line of business?
That is, you're spot on. There's a lot of problems out there that one doesn't need to worry about. But I think this one is worthwhile. We're really trying to solve for creating an ecosystem and a platform where we can start to modernize the capital market infrastructure. So the pipes that we work on are very robust. They're scalable. They've been around for 50, 60 years. But with the evolution, if you will, of digital assets, we found a way to do things better, faster, and cheaper. It is more accessible to all, and it serves a couple of functions. But those digital assets can't reach their full potential until there's better rails and a better infrastructure. That's the why we're solving for, which is really to create an ecosystem where digital assets can thrive and introduce a much better, faster, and more efficient ecosystem for all.
I see. So tokenization and digital assets and financial inclusions, they go hand in hand. But what about the suitability, however? Are illiquid assets made more liquid through tokens and therefore they are suitable for everyone? I recently went to a panel where there were some skeptics and they were saying like, yeah, you can tokenize private markets, but should anybody be investing in something illiquid like in private equity with a few $1,000s or not, because maybe they cannot afford the losses from this? What's your view on this financial inclusion, and how far can we go so that we don't endanger retail investors?
And that's a great question, Rudy. Protection is job one. That's the concern of our regulators and the concern of any financial institution. It's important to note that these tech companies and tokenization itself isn't changing the risk profile of anything, right? So yes, they're democratizing. Yes, they're making it more accessible, but we all should still exert prudence the way we would invest in the current market. If you're going to go out and buy a share of Apple, chances are you may or may not be able to afford that the same way you can on some of the liquid assets, right? So I don't know if it's really changing the risk profile, but it's definitely making it more accessible. And tokenization alone can't change the liquidity sphere, but it does enable more liquidity in the marketplace. Tokenization has I think in my mind, two functions. One, you just hinted to it, right? It, in theory, should allow for more liquidity, but in order for that liquidity to be there, you need more adoption. On the flip side of that, there is also, when you look at the infrastructure, a lot of the larger legacy banks, big investment managers, there is really a desperate need to modernize the middle and the back offices to be able to ensure that they have there's more efficiency in there. And I think tokenization allows you to do that. Just look at how much money we're spending right now to move from T+3 and 2 to T+1. It's an enormous amount of money, time, and effort that's going in there. Today, in a digital world, you can settle automatically right here and there with finality of settlement. So tokenization does allow for the modernization of the pipe. It will afford a certain level of democratization of asset classes that were out of reach for people like me. And now, if I do want to own a fraction of a building, it is possible. But obviously, to your earlier point, you shouldn't invest what you can't afford to lose, and you should ensure that you're always practicing good risk management practices. So the tools don't create the risk, they create that opportunity, but we all need to continue to exert common sense and good risk management.
So this leads me to the next question. So what do you tokenize? Because some people also say, what in the world in the future will not be tokenized? Everything. So you mentioned the building. What else are we talking about?
Oh my God, you could tokenize anything.
What are your priorities at the moment?
I mean, for Securrency right now, what we're focused on is where our clients are asking us to help them solve issues around private assets. So this is where we're focused most right now, and really helping them understand how they can introduce better efficiencies for private equity, or closed-end funds, and so on. So that is the big proof of concept that clients are looking at right now. They're also looking to figure out a better way to increase the velocity of collateral through tokenization. And I'll tell you, the third use case is actually tokenizing. So it's all about the tokenization of real world assets. I want to be clear on that. And that's the third large use case that we're seeing. Our clients looking to tokenize publicly traded securities, mainly outside of the US, where we're doing that, where again, it goes back to your previous questions on accessibility. You may want to invest in a couple of shares of Apple or Tesla, but can't afford the full share, want a quarter of that. the ability of being able to fractionalize that and making that available is affording others to be able to invest and grow their wealth. And then really, I'll say the last mega pièce de résistance here that Securrency has rolled out in partnership with WisdomTree is a really interesting and new and novel way for this new generation to consume financial products. So through WisdomTree Prime, WisdomTree has been able to take the entire Securrency platform and create a much better client experience around the monetization of their mutual funds, to be able to pay, invest, and bank through one app. So it's something fairly novel in the marketplace, but again, it is affording the ability for people to invest and plan for a better future through accumulation of wealth through a platform that is dedicated to tokenization.
You kind of got the gist of that. Think about it for a second. So, she had a lot to mention, and I played just like maybe 2 or 3 minutes more than I was wanting to. But I liked how she mentioned the focus. The focus, basically, especially towards the end, was the tokenization of real-world assets. Who's also putting a lot of focus on that? Yes, Quant network and so on. Notice also towards the very end, what I was at least, sharing with you guys and so on, because I didn't play the whole 25 minutes, got about to the 7 or 8 minute mark. She was talking about WisdomTree. And at the beginning of the outline, I was talking about the whole thing with Stellar, you making that connection. So we're going to get to that here in a bit as well. But very, very bullish, to say the least, on this. At every single turn of the page, we're getting more into it and so on with these deep dives. We are able to connect some dots on some things that were just like, wow, I thought maybe there's something there, and there actually is. So check this out. Let's take you over to this next part of what we have. I'm going to close out some tabs here for a second, because I'm just trying to have a little better flow. All right. All right, here we go. This is kind of a reminder. You saw this on some other coverage that we have had in the past. I'll try to blow this up a little bit more. I don't know if actually, that's the biggest I can make it. I'll just remind you what this says. I had a bigger picture of this originally. So I believe this is a conversation, with IETF and Martin Hargreaves of Quant. It was about this discussion of use case of CBDCs. This guy says, Wes, he says, having implementation at Swift Hackathon is very good. Wes should avoid focus on permissionless crypto. Again, back to the whole thing of what Dtcc was talking about. And Wes goes on to mention, concentrate on the permissioned systems. Don't talk about NFT/crypto tokens of consumer stuff, right? Like retail. Martin Hargreaves, clarify that tokens are not consumer tokens. These are institutional tokens. Back to the whole thing of what Dtcc has literally outlined. And then it goes on to mention discussion, use case, supply chain, these two people, and so on. There's a lot more to it than just that. All right, now let's go to this. If anything, I'll take that off. And if anything, I'll put this on instead. How you like that? So look at this. Once it gets chopped up, it'll be like a Quant XLM, right? Securrency. You know who they are. We already established who they are. Check this out. Here's a boiler match sticking in stew for just a moment. Introducing Stellar 8 Assist from our partner, Stellar.org, a first of its kind blockchain solution enabling relief organizations to deliver instant and transparent digital aid. Learn how Stellar is pioneering the future of aid of delivery. But again, you understand that connection to Securrency. So you have everything that we outlined in regards to Quant, and now also Stellar. The key factor here, State Street through Securrency. Pretty crazy stuff when you look more into it. So with that said, that is going to conclude the Quant / I guess you could throw in XLM at the end segment of the night. Pretty big stuff. Anytime you could mention something about State Street and connect it all, hey, I think everybody wants to pay attention to that too.